Hi all, welcome. I hope you're having a great afternoon so far. I'm Shay, I'm Glamour's beauty writer. I'd like to introduce on stage my wonderful guests who will be talking about all things Black beauty. So if you'd like to come up. So joining me, I have Rachael Twumasi-Corson. She's the CEO and co-founder of Afrocenchix. And then I have Ozohu Adoh, and she's the CEO and co-founder of Epara Skincare. And also we have Liha.
Having a little technical difficulty.
Sorry.
No worries. Well, we have Abi first, and then we have Liha, and they are the co-founders of Liha Beauty. One thing that all the women on this, well, one of the many things that the women on the stage have in common is that they're Black beauty founders, which is something of a unicorn nowadays. A recent McKinsey report on Black beauty execs in the US explored how major beauty companies were ignoring the needs of Black beauty consumers and obviously missing a huge commercial opportunity. In the UK, for example, we know that Black British women actually spend 6 times more on their hair than their white counterparts. But obviously, anecdotally, we know that the experience of Black women, securing investment to then effectively cater to that community is sparse and tricky. But luckily, we have a wave of Black female founders who have come to fill that gap. So I'd love to discuss that experience with you guys. And I wanted to start with Ozohu. And I wanted to know, what was that aha moment when you identified that there was, a gap in the market, and what were the first steps that you took? And when did you hit that first hurdle?
Right. I would say there was no aha moment per se, because it was a series of little things, sort of all building up. But the main thing really that took me from my sort of corporate world career, which I had been in for over 10 years, was because I was actually suffering from a skin problem. And I remember the sort of the devastation I felt when I went to the dermatologist, and they said to me, well, so we've done this patch test for 2 days and we can't tell what's wrong with you. And so, that felt really sort of demoralizing. So, of course, before then, I had been using the types of products that I'm selling now, but which was catered to sort of the general market, and I wasn't getting sort of the results I wanted. So, so eventually I just said, okay, you know what, because I can't tell what I am reacting to, I'm just going to start experimenting, and that was how it all started. I started experimenting with African botanicals, and then I started to see some results, and then people started asking me, well, what's up? And I remember the definitive moment that someone said to me, this stuff is really good. Have you tried sort of commercializing it? And I was like, no. She's like, okay, maybe you should think about it. Mind you that, what you had on was a very stable career, which I was doing very well in, and this unknown world, which someone was asking me to do. So, of course, I could see that there was a very underserved market, and I was one of the people in that sort of audience. So I felt that, maybe perhaps I could bring this out to the world. So that was kind of the first sort of, inkling to start something like this. Now, with regards to my first hurdle, well, initially, I started funding it myself. But because of the positioning of the brand, I was trying to target the luxury market. Remember, this was before Rihanna came out with Fenty. This was before, anyone thought that there was a market. And so I had to fund it myself. But then it came to a point where I just couldn't afford it, and so I had to go looking for money. I left my job in 2015. We couldn't launch the brand in 2017, and those 2 years was basically just trying to get money to fund sort of the initial production and launching into the market.
Thank you. Liha and Abi, obviously you guys are a duo, so you kind of came together. I would love to hear a very short version of how you came together. But I wanted to really know about that process of product development to the launch and then the distribution, because, as we were saying, investment is like a big part of it. So I wanted to know what your experience was. And also if you could compare it to any of your peers that may not have been Black women.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah, that is a lot. So we've known each other for over 20 years. We went to university together.
Our kind of route was just, we always made our own products, so our own kind of kitchen beauty, as we called it. And I used to be an athlete, and so I retired in 2012. And we always wanted to start a business together. Liha's mum's an English aromatherapist, so we wanted to blend our two cultures of being like West African and English aromatherapy, and like bringing like the West African staples like black soap and shea butter that nobody really knew about, and bringing that to like the Western market. Yeah, I think that's how we kind of started. Yeah, you go ahead.
That is kind of how we started. The grit bit that I think nobody sees, that like I'm a shopkeeper's daughter, I grew up above shops, so for me a business was you make it, you sell it, and if you eat, you eat, if it works, it works. So I didn't actually know anything about, I think we both did nothing about the world of investing. We came up with the idea, we're like, okay, boom, how much savings do we have?
Three grand
3K each. So it's us in the kitchen, then it's us in a windowless studio, and then it's just graphs, the markets in the cold.
Never thinking about anybody giving us money to.
It just didn't occur to our minds. And I think when you talk about a difference in whether it's like a class thing or it's just what you're exposed to, I feel like. I'd never been exposed to that world, neither of us have been exposed to that world, whereas some people, and when we started to actually get into the raising process, a lot of people were kind of like, well, why don't you just do a friends and family raise? That was
so
such
annoying. We don't have friends and family that can give us 20
you
grand.
could get 50K from friends and family. You're like, okay, that's your network, that's okay. And there are people, I don't think it's necessarily a race thing, I think it's a class thing. There are a lot of black privileged people that will have access to all of that. We didn't have that, so we had a very different journey. We were super lucky because we went on a Virgin accelerator.
Yeah, so I had seen another founder go on this accelerator, and I was like, let's just do it. And Liha's a bit more kind of, because we've done Kickstarter before, and that was an absolute nightmare. And so I
have a wrinkle, I call it my Kickstarter wrinkle.
And it was like, Virgin's got this thing where it's like an introduction to raising through Seeders and that kind of fund. And so we went on this 8 weeks accelerator, and they were just teaching us about investment, the investment world, writing a deck, doing a financial plan. And they had this thing where you'd have to pitch to mock investor. So they've got a massive network. So we pitched these investors, and they were like, and we just thought it was a mock investment. And it was two old white guys, and we didn't think anything of it. It was like, yeah, well, they can get it, whatever. And the next day, I just had a baby. So I had a phone call and said from the guy who was running the accelerator, John, and he said, oh, they want to invest in your company. And we were like, what? And they're like, yeah, they're going to give you the whole 250. And yeah, so we don't have a traditional story for investment, but that's how it kind of came to fruition. Really.
Yeah, I think we were quite blessed in that.
You were very lucky. We didn't have to go out there and raise.
Yeah, which we are doing now, which
is a new kind of thing.
Yeah, I think they saw. They saw the journey.
No, I was just wondering what the timeline was from the idea to then, oh my gosh, the product is out and people need to buy it now because they spend money on us.
It was quite long. It took us a year and a half to. Our Edan oil is the one that's like our hero product. It's been sold in Liberty, and Vogue wrote about it. Oh, actually, Shea Butter, Vogue wrote about it. It took us about a year. It took us a long time, a year and a half to do.
I would say about a year and a half to 2 years for the formulation, and a lot of kind of like market testing, things like that. So we kind of say that we officially launched when we sort of launched onto Net-a-Porter, and we got the raise, and we started to outsource the production.
No, 2019.
And we left our kitchens.
We used to
2018.
Yeah.
But it was a good 2 years. So we kind of started kickstarting everything 2016, really. And we both had 2 other jobs at the time, and that was our like third side hustle. And that was the other thing that was really annoying, is people kept saying, quit your jobs. Like, okay, yeah, sure.
Yeah, you can't pay yourself straight away.
Yeah,
right. Yeah, it took a while.
Yeah. Rachel, so where did the idea of Afrocenchix stem from? And upon launch, how did you utilize the power of social media to really like spearhead, the campaign? And I heard about Afrocenchix through social media, so I know that you must have implemented it in your marketing strategy, but what did that look like?
Very good question. So there's lots of similarities in all of these stories. I'm going to go way back to when I was 14, right? So Afrocenchix officially launched when I was 19, but the genesis of it was really in the making. So I remember being 14, and I just had a relaxer, and all the skin on the back of my neck was burnt off. There was no skin, it was raw. I've got eczema, so I can't really afford to be having skin problems like that. It was incredibly painful, and I remember a couple of nights after it happened, not really being able to sleep. And me and my brothers were very nerdy and into computer games, and we used to kind of build our own computers. So I went down to one of these computers, which I only really used for gaming, occasionally for homework, went on Ask Jeeves, and what had been keeping me up wasn't the burn. It was actually the fact that I had a bald patch at the age of about 14. And the worst bit is it wasn't my first bald patch. The issue for me at this point was that I already had eczema. I'd started to get acne, so I was like, clearly God hates me. And I just thought, I'm gonna get bullied so hard if I go to school with this bald patch. So I went on Ask Jeeves and I started asking, what do you do to grow back your hair? And that was the night I discovered forums, right? That was the night I discovered these communities of black women all around the world, all having these same issues. And that was the night when I realized that the problem wasn't me. So I had all these boxes of relaxers with all these beautiful girls with their hair looking so good. And I never looked like that girl. My hair looked limped, it looked terrible. But I always thought, well, the girl in the box looks great, I don't. I am the problem. And it's really funny, side note, because there's been a Twitter thread recently with all the relaxer box girls showing themselves. What's hilarious about that is about half of them have either said that their hair was always natural, and it was a scam. So it was straightened for the picture, but the reason they had so much body, the reason it looked so good, is because it was their natural hair. And then some of the other ones who actually did have a relaxer, there weren't many of them, they were usually the ones who had maybe a texturizer. They've since gone natural. So even the people who were advertising these toxic products aren't using them. But I didn't know that when I was 14, right? So I remember that night being on the computer in this forum. And in the forum, it told me that carrot oil will grow my hair back. So I remember that weekend getting like my pocket money together, going down to the black hair supply store, and I remember buying like 3 or 4 different products because they all had carrot oil. Carrot oil does not grow your hair. This was just, it was no research, just pure vibes in this forum. But I believed it because I connected with people. There was that trust there. So I went and I bought my carrot oil products. They did not work. So that was also the year when I discovered weave. So I used to cover up my bald patches with hair extensions. Then I got to university. So I was in law school, I was 18, 19, and I'd asked a friend to relax my hair for me, and she started, and then she said, I'm never doing this again. Your scalp is a mess, your neck is a mess. Why are you doing this? And we started talking about natural ingredients. And by this point, I wasn't going to believe just anything I heard. So we had this conversation. I used to joke that studying a humanities degree just got you an expensive library card. So I went to the library. I started reading cosmetic science papers. I actually did sciences at A-level because I wanted to be a doctor. Then don't ask me how I ended up on a law course. It's a long story. But I was reading these cosmetic science journals and learning that the random creams and potions and lotions that aunties would bring me back from Ghana with things like shea butter, there was actually research that backed up why those natural ingredients that our ancestors have been using for generations, why those things worked. So then a friend and I just ordered different raw materials. I remember ordering like beakers and pipettes and petri dishes and setting up a bit of a lab in my university hall's kitchen. At that point, the regulation around cosmetics was, there wasn't any really. It was very, very limited compared to now. It's a good thing that there's a lot of regulation now, because at the time, as a 19-year-old, I was able to do a bit of research, order some things, whip things together, and just go out to a market stall and sell them and see how it went. And that was pretty much how Afrocenchix started. And then the segue into social media is essentially, I started a blog because I wanted people to know the things that I was learning. And I would get people contacting me from all around the world who are really interested in this research. I tried at first to find another brand that I could just buy from and tell people about for the blog. And I couldn't really find anything. There was one company around called Hair We Grow Natural. They're not in business anymore. And she just said, I've got a full-time job. I don't really want to make this any bigger. It's just for me and my friends and whoever else can buy it. So when I realized this has to be a business, there are other people like me, they need help, and me and my friend initially started the business. We didn't have any money. We put in about £50 each. Started this blog. I think it was Tumblr, just to make things more embarrassing. And then I built a really basic like WordPress site. But we had a lot of interest, and the way that we were able to kind of grow that and turn it into a community was initially with a Facebook page. I also had a Twitter account because my part-time job in law school was I used to be a brand ambassador for beauty brands and tech brands, very randomly. So one of the tech brands I worked for selling like graphic tablets, they made me start a Twitter account. So I had Twitter, and in the early days of Twitter, you could connect to like CEOs, to all these founders, all these celebrities, because no one was really there, right? It was pretty quiet. I used to win these competitions all the time. There were like 2 entrants, one of them was me. And actually turning that Twitter into, okay, we'll just tweet out the blog post that I'm writing. Filming YouTube videos once a week, just like sitting in my kitchen on a Sunday after church. Doing things like Facebook posts that are really informative, and trying to almost recreate that initial forum experience I had when I was 14, but this time with actual facts and proper research, not just vibes. The vibes were there too, of course. That made all the difference. And in the early days, you could grow your social media pages really quickly. I think I got to like 2,000 followers on Facebook, or likes, fans, whatever they called them, within a number of months. And then the next 1,000 took like several years because we had no money. But even now, social media is really important for us. So everything, we're on Instagram, on YouTube. We're starting to build up more content and more of a community on TikTok. We're on Reddit. And you kind of have to move with the times and just go where the people are. And for us, it's still a lot of focus is on Instagram, because that's where a lot of black women go to learn about hair care.
This question is for all of us, but I'd love to start with you, Ozohu. Do you think that there's still a lack of diversity in the beauty industry? Because obviously we have 4 beautiful black women that are, in their bag. We have the Rihannas of the world, but is there still a severe need for founders, better marketing, better product selection, a better diversity in the boardroom? And if so, what are your suggestions to improve it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very good question, but it's also a bit complex because it needs a nuanced answer. So, of course, right now, the beauty market is very saturated, right? So, like, bringing in more people, you really do have to have a point of difference, to be able to cut through the noise. So that's one point. However, I think where we are now, when I started doing this in 2014 to where we are today, it's been impressive in terms of its improvement. So there's definitely more access to products and better quality products, I would have to say, for people of color. So that's really important. And what we are seeing, like in our case, we started with a very clear idea that this is for women of color. But as time has gone on, the market itself has now dictated otherwise. So we started very clearly, and then we started finding the people were using our products. So especially when we went into stores, so in Harrods and in Barney's in New York, before Barney's went out of business, we were then seeing people posting about our products, and they were not black women. So we started saying, okay, what's going on here? So that was kind of interesting. So in terms of how can we have a more diverse sort of ecosystem, absolutely, in terms of in the formulation, so people doing research to understand what reacts to black skin, black hair, and stuff like that. That's really important. In decision making, that will be also useful, particularly in the bigger business, but sometimes you don't have to wait for the big business. People like us are actually going in and taking the fight to say, look, we don't need to wait for you anymore to make it, we are going to make it. So that's a good thing. And then thirdly, in terms of representation, just seeing people, in ads, again, because we have made, say, digital ads more democratic now. Anyone can create an ad. So therefore, we are now beginning to see more diversity in people who are representing those brands. So I think that's it's generally a positive trend, I would say.
Mm-hmm. If we were focusing on like retailers, which is, in a more consumer lens, Liha and Abi, do you think that the retailers are still not serving black consumers in the UK? Because obviously, we still hear conversations about like racism in the counter and things like that. And if so, what do you think needs to be done to change that?
I think having worked in retail, like my first job was in the Body Shop in 1996 when Anita Roddick owned it, and then I worked for Space NK when they were very young as well. And I feel like it's changed so much for the better since then, but there is still a long way to go. And a lot of it, I think, is to do with training, and a lot of it also is to do with the fact that skin is skin. As you said, like, as Black founders, generally, the history has been that we only sell to each other.
Yeah.
But what we wanted to do is kind of say, we want to be the next heritage brand of the future. Like, everyone knows the statistic that in 20 years or however long it is, the whole world is going to be brown, basically, you know. And I think we don't have to accept the world's definitions necessarily, because these products are amazing, our ingredients are amazing, the secrets are amazing, and everybody needs to know them. But to answer your question, it's basically training. It's just literally having everybody learn more about, I think, tackling skin issues, tackling hair issues, because you might have, you know, a Black woman and a white woman that's menopausing that have the exact same skin issue.
Yeah.
And that's the part that I find really interesting, is kind of like finding a way of trying to level it. There's specialist ideas, but just to kind of level it and stop making it so differentiated.
Yeah, I agree.
Abi, where do you see the market like evolving to, and what can consumers and you know, investors and brands do in order to help it progress and to further accommodate like Black consumer needs?
I think there just has to be a diversity, representation, not just about, you know, skin color, but representation, or diversity in thought, diversity in, you know, ethnicity, in age, and I think in everything. So once you've got that, once you've got like diverse representation, I think those kind of like, you know, the consumer needs will be met. So people will be coming together and thinking about like what people need, rather than just thinking about one kind of race or whatever. And I think that's how it's going to evolve. You know, I think things like social media just like democratized everything. It's allowed people not to just go to like, you know, Roots or whatever. It's like, you know, going, you know, TikTok's becoming an SEO. They'll just Google, and their friends will be telling them, you know, about things. So I think that's going to cut through, and that's how it's going to evolve. And I think retailers will just, they're catching up, and they will catch up. And I think, yeah, it's just an evolution, you know, it's an evolution process. And just like Liha says, it's like just training and people understanding different needs and skin conditions.
I think what's really, really important as well is having diversity across the board, like
Yeah.
on the retail floor, in the boardroom. You know, when you're making decisions, make sure there's a diverse team in the room. And you know, there's scientific studies that have shown that creates more success in general. It creates more success for the company, for the consumer, for everyone. We had a really weird situation at an event that will remain nameless, where, can you remember?
No.
Where it was like a retail event. I'm trying to think of a way to say this without sounding shady. It was a retail event, and it was a nice, big, diverse venue, and they had put all the black founders in this weird little side alley. And when we had approached them about this, the lady said something so random that we had to just stare at her until she heard what she said in her own brain and was like, "Ooh!" And I literally was just like, "This is what happens when you don't have." Because the thing she said was so ridiculous. I can't even remember what her excuse was, but it was so...
I think it's just because, like Liha was saying, when those decisions are made, there is no diversity, and you know, there's no brown, Black people in the room, and they're saying, like, actually, why would you put all these people together? Because our skin care products, it's just not for Black people, it's for everybody. You know, like Liha says, skin to skin. And if you don't have that diversity or representation, things go missing. People don't see it because they're blinkered. So yeah.
Circling back to investment, I feel like with Black women, and that's just not in business, just like in everyday life, we feel like we have a different set of rules for a lot of things. I'm wondering whether you guys had like that process of like, you know, seeking investment. Did you feel like you had to like code switch, for example, or what set of rules did you feel like you had to abide to sort of get the brands to where they are? And I'm directing the question to all of you.
Yeah, code switching is just life for Black people. You're constantly code switching. I think for me anyway, it's just a natural thing. And I didn't even know that was a thing, code switching. It's just what you do. You grew up, which is really sad that you grew up doing that, and it becomes embedded in you without even thinking about it. So it's an automatic thing for me.
And I think also being able to translate context is really important. So when we started Afrocenchix back in 2009, buyers wouldn't speak to me. And it took a while before I could get into those doors. And then between 2009 and our first launch in a major retailer, so that was in Whole Foods back in 2017, and in 2017 we were the first brand for Afro hair to launch in Whole Foods in 2017. Like that's a bit outrageous, right? But it wasn't surprising to me because I would have meetings with buyers in that void in between, and they would frequently say things like, oh, people of that demographic don't shop here. And I would think, I'm that demographic, I shop. Maybe I shouldn't be shopping here. Or they would say, I remember 2 buyers in about the same month said, we already have a product for that hair type.
Yeah, that's insane.
Guess what the product was? The same product that burnt the skin off the back of my neck.
Oh my God.
Right? The product they were selling was relaxer. And remember, relaxer, the active ingredient is sodium hydroxide. That's the active ingredient in oven cleaner, in drain unblocker. It's caustic soda, it's incredibly alkali. And even though, skin is skin, melanin is slightly acidic, right? So that means that you need to look at the pH balance. And funnily enough, if a product is designed with black skin in mind and it takes that pH balance into account, it actually works better for all skin types, weirdly enough. Because it means that if you're white and you have a tan, you can still use the product, it's still gonna work great for you. And people didn't get that context. And what was worse is one of these buyers who said, we have a product for that category, for that hair type, their store, I'm not gonna name the store, they had 12 products for blonde hair. Now, I studied trichology, right? So I know way too much about hair care. It's very, very nerdy. But what I can tell you is blonde hair is one of the rarest types of hair,
there's
right?
no people that's not.
Right? Most blonde women you see with straight blonde hair, they don't even have straight blonde hair, right? People are bleaching their hair, people are straightening it. So the percentage of people that have afro or curly hair is actually quite large, right? There's over 3.6 billion people worldwide with afro or curly hair. Curly hair, even amongst English people, is more common. And people were just not understanding this context. So my husband's Welsh, and I remember speaking to his stepdad, who's like a farmer in the valleys, and I would think, if I can get the pitch right for him, then if I can get Nigel to understand it, right, in between talking about tech for his cows, then I'm going to be able to sell it to buyers, I'm going to be able to sell it to investors, and that was part of it. But it took so long. Now I can explain it to anyone. People get it super quickly. They understand that if you take the most neglected category in beauty and you develop products that work well for them, you improve things for everyone, right? It's like, it's any area where you're looking at diversity and inclusion. If you think of like teletext, right? So many of us use subtitles, so many of us use teletext, and that was created for who? For deaf people, right? So we looked at this segment with a disability, we thought, how do we make things better for them? And it made it better for everyone. So it's similar when it comes to skin and hair care. And with Afrocenchix, our mission is to make sure that everyone has access to safe, effective, ethical products, right? These are things that people maybe didn't care about 10 years ago, but now we're more aware of what we put onto our body, right? And that means that my Welsh husband, who has straight hair, who's been able to buy products forever, it's helped him as well. He used to get dandruff until he switched to Afrocenchix Swiss shampoo. He hasn't had dandruff since we got married. My head of ops has straight blonde hair. And when she joined, she was a bit cautious about using the products, and I gave them to her, and she's like, no, my hair's flat, it's not gonna work for me. And then she was really excited, and she said, Rachel, my hair's got a volume, look at it. Because even the products that were created for her hair, they weren't doing the job, right? So the reality is, the beauty industry in general kind of sucks. It capitalizes on the insecurities of women to sell us toxic rubbish, right? Look at how many times companies like Johnson's & Johnson's have been sued because they've knowingly sold products that are giving people cancer, right? You've got those issues. I've had a lot of prospective CVs. I won't name the companies, but I would say the Unilevers and Procter & Gamble's of the world. People who work in product development at those companies have gotten in touch, sent their CVs, I've interviewed them, and some of them are black women who are just so frustrated at the way that these products are designed, because they're not tested on actual Afro or curly hair. They take straight European hair, chemically treat it to be curly, test the products on that, and then they wonder why it doesn't work. They won't listen to their black employees who say, can we avoid these products that have been proven to be toxic and have proven to be linked to fibroids and cancers and respiratory issues? And then we wonder why the beauty industry is, fragmented and women are upset, right? And I think now more than ever, it's really important to increase that diversity to make things better for everyone, especially in a recession, right? We've all heard of the lipstick index, right? So during a recession, you can't go on your nice holidays, maybe you can't have as many fancy dinners, so you buy a nice lipstick to make yourself feel good. But does that lipstick work for everyone, Before Fenty came out, I couldn't wear lipstick without my lips breaking out in some kind of crust, right? So I think that there's a lot of work to be done, but I think it's important that the work is done, and it's important that everyone works together to make sure that things like health and well-being actually come first when it comes to beauty and personal care.
I think it's important to remind everyone as well that actually the Black British consumer has the buying power of about £300 billion. Only 2% of that is spent on Black businesses or invested in Black businesses. So I think that's important to know. Yeah. I just have one last question, and it's a quick fire one. I love asking this question to people that I speak to, because I think it's really great advice for myself personally, but I think people find it helpful. What's the worst advice you've ever been given when starting your business? If we could go down this way.
What's the what?
The worst advice you've ever been given.
Oh my God. I'm going to have to think about that one. Go this way.
Yeah, let's go this
way.
Yeah.
I was told Black women don't have any money, so don't make products for them, even though Black women on average spend £50 a month on their hair.
Well, I was told that I should go to the farmer's market to start, and because I said to somebody I wanted to go to Selfridges, and he said, no, go to the farmer's market, and I said no. Anyway, we launched it at Harrods, and we are going to be in Selfridges later this month.
I started off selling in markets, and we just launched in Selfridges last month. So I don't know that it's terrible advice. You can do both.
We're really stumped on this one. I don't think we've ever been given really bad advice, but we've been given a lot of unsolicited advice of people where they don't know what it's like, but they go, oh, have you tried this, or have you thought about this? And you're just kind of like, I think we're okay. But we haven't ever had anything really...
I can't think of anything
terrible.
That's good. Keep your eye out.
Keep my eye out.
Then you'll know what not to do.
I would say a lot of people, for me, I've done businesses before, so it's if a lot of people say no in the early stages, and a lot of people go, I'll tell you what it is. We do workshops, right, and we teach people how to make their own natural products with aromatherapy oils, like a crash course in aromatherapy, and we teach them how to use shea butter, because a lot of people have seen it, heard of it, but they don't know how to use it. And everyone said to us at the beginning, they were like, if you teach people how to make their own stuff, they're not going to buy your products. And we're like, that's ridiculous. And yeah, it's not true. Actually, people enjoy it, and they enjoy the process, and then they end up.
And nobody ever really actually makes their own products, so
no one can be bothered.
They just want to feel like they're doing they're doing something really well. But and then they'll come back and buy our stuff.
And everybody said that. They were like, that's never going to work, and it's actually worked. And we're doing a workshop at Netflix next week, which is exciting.
Amazing.